Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rakajaman Khan, and along with me is Kajiwaratul Islam. Today, we will present a critically analyzed comparison between the roles of elite women in two very different political systems: the monarchy of Achaemenid Persian Empire and the non-monarchy of the Roman Republic. I'll start by looking at how these systems shaped women's access to power and political life. First, let's understand how political systems affected women's roles. In Achaemenid Persian Empire, which was a monarchy, elite women could gain actual power. This power came through their family ties, especially if they were close to the royal line. They also controlled large estates and were involved in politics at the royal court. But in the Roman Republic, which was a non monarchy, women were excluded from formal political power. They couldn't vote or take part in official government roles. However, they still found ways to be influential, mainly through mainly through religion, wealth, and family networks. So even though both systems were patriarchal, women's paths to power looked very different. Let's now look at how rituals were connected to women's roles in each society, starting with Rome. Roman women were excluded from public religious rituals. They were expected to stay modest and silent, especially in political and religious life. But they weren't powerless. Inside the home, women led household religious rituals and were deeply respected in that role. Sometimes they even challenged public authority. A great example is Hortensia, who gave a bold public speech in 42 BCE protesting unfair taxes on elite women. This was rare, but it shows that women could resist social norms when needed. So in Rome, rituals were mostly used to reinforce male control. But there were moments when women pushed back. Now in Persia, it was the opposite. Rituals were a way for elite women to show power. Women like Atossa and Idrabama took part in royal banquets, hosted guests, and handed out expensive gifts. These weren't just parties, they were political performances. Women even appeared in Persian art, leading workers or receiving guests, showing that they had publicly respected roles. So in Persia, rituals gave women visibility and authority, unlike in Rome, where rituals often excluded them. This contrast shows that, unlike in Rome, where women's ritual roles were controlled to the private sphere, Persian elite women used public rituals to assert political influence and visibility. Let's now move on to social and political power. In Rome, women were not allowed to vote or speak publicly in political meetings, but they still made an impact. Women like Terentia, who was the wife of the famous politician Cicero, used her position to manage his finances and political connections while he was in exile. And again, Hortensia's speech wasn't just a bold moment. It actually pressured the government to lower taxes on elite women. So, while Roman women didn't have official roles, they gained power through resistance, protest, and influence at home. In Persia, elite women had more formal, structural roles. For example, Atossa, the daughter of the Cyrus the Great, married King Darius the First and was the mother of Xerxes the First. She helped to manage royal succession and had real political influence. Parasitis, the mother of Artaxerxes the Second, is also known to have been involved in court politics, including punishments and diplomacy. So, unlike Rome, where women found power by going around the system, Persian elite women were part of the system itself. Their power came from inside the court. That concludes my part. Now I will pass it to my teammate, Kaji Wahidul Islam, who will continue with the legal and economic roles of women in these two societies.
Thank you, Rafiat. Let's now explore how women handled wealth and legal rights. In Rome, which had a non monarchy system, women were legally under their father and their later their husbands. But a type of marriage called non monogamous allowed elite women to stay legally connected to their birth family. If their father died, those women become sui iuris, which mean legally independent. This made them the right to own property, run businesses, and even fund public works. But it's important to note that these freedoms was mostly for wealthy women. It wasn't about gender equality. It was always about the class. Now, in Persia, which was a monarchy, elite women also had a strong economic power, but it came from custom and royal status, not the loopholes like the one in Roman Empire or Republic. Women like Irdabama owned huge states and controlled hundreds of workers. She even had her own seal, which she used to issue official orders. Her name appears in records like the Persepolis tablets, where she is shown distributing rations and making administrative decisions. So, while the Roman women gained economic power slowly through changes in law, Persian women had it as a norm, especially if they were close to royal family. Now, let's bring everything together. Both the Persia and Roman were patriarchal, meaning man had the official power, but the elite found the ways to work within or around the system. In Persia, women like Atosa were included into court ritual and held power from the inside, though their dynasty and the role is succession. In Rome, women like Torrentina and Hortensia had to push from outside, using their voice, their money, and their family ties to influence decisions. Economically, women in the both society own property and manage estates, but how they gained the power was totally different. And again, it all came down to class, wealthy women, and more freedom regardless of the system. The poor one were never heard of. Our critical comparison between Achaemenid Persia and Roman Republic shows that women power in the ancient world wasn't just about the law. It was about how women navigated the system around them. In Persia, elite women like Atosa and Irdabama were able to work inside the court structure using ritual, family ties, and state ownership to gain authority. Their power was to build into the royal framework. It was visible, accepted, and even expected in some cases. In contrast, Roman women had no official access to political or ritual life, but they did not stop them. Women like Torrentia and Hortensia found clever ways to shape political outcomes, from managing finances to speaking out publicly when they were not supposed to. What this tells us in the power doesn't always look the same. It can came through law, though wealth, though family, or though bold resistance. And most importantly, it shows that women in the ancient time were not passive. They were strategic, adaptive, and influential, even within strict patriarchal limits. Their stories remind us that systems may rigid, but people can be flexible and powerful within them. So, this is the end of our presentation. So, this is the references that we used for this presentation. Thank you so much for listening and goodbye.